I would like to I'd like to read a little something about Thanksgiving. This was from the Federalist. It was written by Peter Wood, and it's called "No, Thanksgiving is Not About Genocide and Violence," because of course that's another thing you get out of people these days.
It's a white supremacist holiday.
Yeah. When are people going to get it right? It's about supremacy. It's not about violence and genocide. Oh, that's not you. That's you. Okay, you ready for this? It's the only thing I'm going to do in the opening here. It's a short article. And I think it sums up... it's a nice little rebuke of all the pukey stuff that goes on television and radio and all that stuff. Americans have had a great and exuberant tradition that touches our sense of belonging and our pride in coming together. No, I'm not referring to Thanksgiving, that festival of gratitude, generosity, and welcome. I'm referring to the equally great and exuberant tradition of trash-talking other people. Well, wasn't it Alice Roosevelt? Alice Roosevelt. I got to talk about her one night on the show. She was a pistol. Every time Aurora growls at me, I was like, oh, she's going to be an Alice Roosevelt. I better watch out here. I think it was Alice Roosevelt, Teddy's daughter, who said, if you haven't got anything good to say, come sit near me. Haven't anything got nice to say about someone else, come sit near me. So you just come trash talk with me and gossip. What did Teddy say about her? Somebody had asked Teddy about Alice, some kind of socialite gallivanting she was doing, and they wanted to ask him about what he thought about what she had said or done or whatever. And I think he cut the guy off, or whoever the reporter was, and said, I can be the president of the United States, or I can be Alice Roosevelt's father. I cannot possibly do both. And sometimes I just say, I'm holding my breath. I'm holding my breath. Okay, let's see here. Supposedly, back to the article. Supposedly, we have reformed. Ethnic slurs that were once common have retreated to the dark corners of dive bars and even darker corners of anti-social media. We live in a time when a whole new admonitory vocabulary has emerged to warn people away from anything remotely racist. Cultural appropriation is taboo, as must be the word taboo itself. A Tongan word appropriated into English by Captain James Cook. Oh, boy, we can't use taboo anymore. We worry about demeaning stereotypes, microaggressions, implicit bias, normativity, neocolonialism, and the othering of others. Surely we are more enlightened than those vile, imperialistic, hate-filled, white, heteronormative people who, oops, ethnic slurs haven't disappeared. They have just slipped into new register. Black Lives Matter. But all lives matter? Them's fighting words. Attacking someone else, after all, is a classic way of demonstrating loyalty to one's own group, claiming group superiority and policing the edges. Gyasi Ross, a Native American author, Huffington Post, Gawker, Indian Country Today, and attorney, rapper, speaker, and storyteller, explained on MSNBC the other day, speaking of the Mayflower Pilgrims, quote, instead of bringing stuffing and biscuits, those settlers brought genocide and violence. Speaking of Thanksgiving, Ross adds, that genocide and violence is still on the menu. How could you say this stuff with a straight face?
Yeah, everyone knows it was Spain that genocided all of them.
If take this an example, if take this as an attempt to write the historical record, it's hopeless. That's true. You can't really attempt to write the record with people like this. They don't even care about listening. So you just have to, it's almost like when going back into the city in the 90s or something. I remember in the 90s going to see, I don't know, I think it might have been Titanic on Broadway. It was a limited run, this Broadway show, or it could have been Hello Dolly or something. And we were leaving the theater afterwards. I was young. I was probably in 5th or 6th grade. Anthony was in 4th or 3rd grade. And we left the studio as the theater as my first remembrance of a really insane New York City homeless person. Like the one I can remember. I've seen bums just lying on the street and stuff like that, people muttering to themselves. But this was a half-naked black guy who had almost like gold something stuck in his hair, and He was dancing through the street. It was cold as hell.
Probably spray paint. He's probably huffing that
Dude,
spray paint.
Maybe. And he was dancing through the street, like doing pirouettes and triple lutzes and all that shit. Okay? Looked like he was ice skating, even though it was in the middle of the street on the blacktop. And he was screaming something about being Jesus. And I was like, wow.
Jesus.
It was startling. I was like, wow, that guy thinks he's Jesus. You know? And then you really realize that's a person. I'm just going to stay so far away from this guy because obviously he lives in another universe, and there's no reason why I should interact with him. And anybody should, unless, of course, you're law enforcement, he's doing something bad, he needs to be, detained or something like that. But that's the same kind of awe I have now when you somehow come across the media that was generated from the television. The people who do the news, they are the a little bit well-dressed version of the mentally ill black guy that I saw outside of the theater, dancing around, half naked, in the cold, screaming that he was Jesus Christ. And there's no point you want to teach that person history. They can't hear you. They can't hear you. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, if you take this as an attempt to write the historical record, it's hopeless. The Pilgrims didn't bring genocide to America. They barely brought themselves, which half of their company dying at first winter, of course, in 1620 to 1621. For that matter, genocide was already here among native peoples, who frequently fought wars of extermination against rival tribes. The archaeological record testifies to such events, and Europeans had little to do with the native peoples that they encountered anything with about ambush or torture and the death penalty. They had many of that. In fact, all the Taino, the tribes in the Caribbean where Columbus actually landed out there, they were cannibals. In fact, do you know that one time when an expedition from Europe had landed in one of those like Puerto Rico areas over there, it was known, of course, that these people were cannibals. And one time they had snatched from a Western camp a monk or some kind of a priest. And all of the people in this tribe that had eaten the priest, they became very sick. So they thought that people who dressed in the robes and the habits and all that stuff, they're cursed, they're religiously, they're spiritually protected, stay away from them. So a lot of those early explorers, when this, it was almost like a scouting report, dress like a priest if you come over here, they'll stay away from you a little bit more. So, I mean, yeah, there's all this stuff. Even in around the area of Plymouth Rock and all that, there was a lot of evidence that there was a great amount of epidemic, just diseases that wiped out entire people where there were just bones scattered over open fields.
Yeah, what, Jamestown or whatever it was?
It wasn't
Roanoke?
I'm talking about 300 miles up north in Massachusetts. That first it wasn't the first year that they got there, 1620. That was actually the first Thanksgiving. The real Thanksgiving that we celebrate is the one where they had ditched communism for giving everybody a parcel of land and allowing them to go fend for themselves because communism was killing them. We can get into that some other time. But that first time, when they were just scouting the land, they saw so much of what had been settled at one point, plowed fields and all that stuff, was eerily empty. Bones of people all over the place. Like, how could this have happened? They must have died in place. But they found these sacks of corn, hundreds of pounds of corn already picked for them. It was one of the ways that they were able to survive. So biological epidemics was no stranger here. Warfare, slavery, everything, rape, pillaging. It was no but the noble savage lie, that is very important for people who are trying to get political power in the 21st century, that's for sure. Let's see here. For that matter, genocide was already here among the native peoples who frequently fought wars of extermination against rival tribes. The archaeological record testifies to such events, and Europeans had little to teach the native peoples they encountered anything about ambush, torture, and the death penalty. But if Ross is simply attempting to show off his command of insults toward people of one tribe or another with his own words, and he has done a pretty good job. His pitch is that the white people have a Thanksgiving mythology that portrays the Pilgrims as having brought something of great value that enriches people who are already here. But the truth is that Pilgrims were broke, and they brought nothing of value. That, however, was hardly the view of Wampanoag, with whom the white settlers of Plymouth celebrated that feast in the fall of 1621 that we call the first Thanksgiving. The Wampanoag, first of all, saw the Pilgrims as a valuable ally against their enemies, the Narragansett, who appeared ready to attack. They signed a treaty with the settlers that lasted unbroken for 50 years. The Wampanoag also eagerly engaged the settlers in trade to gain access to European manufactured goods. Moreover, the Pilgrims brought Christianity, which within a generation attracted a large number of Indian converts. And it goes on for a little while more. It's a wonderful story. Just a little bit. It's reading for people like you and I, because no one else is really going to care outside of this this crazy gaggle of people dancing in the streets of New York, screaming that they're Jesus Christ.